Here I am, 40th anniversary of the miners' strike. I'm with an old friend from the South Yorkshire coalfield, Paul Symonds, better known as Jip, in his native South Emsall. 40th anniversary, Paul. Happy or sad memories of the strike?
Very happy.
Why is that?
Just some fabulous memories. Some you come from. You just meet so many different people. You meet your heroes. You see people change in front of your very eyes. You see ideas change. Solidarity becomes tangible. When we grow up, I was born, 10 odd years after the Second World War, and what everybody used to always say, it's not like it used to be at war when everybody stuck together. And, as kids growing up, we used to hear all that. And to be honest, the miners' strike, that came again where that solidarity, that people looking after everybody, people's watching everybody's backs, a community which were already tight. Mining communities have always been great, but seeing it pull tighter and they just, I was excited by new ideas that I've not heard before, in terms of politics and things, and it was very exciting times. I mean, intellectually, you were stretching yourself, you started reading books, you started looking at world through a different lens. So, we had some absolutely tough times. A few days into strike, I lost one of my best mates on picket line, David Jones. So there were tragedy. It were all entwined. But in terms of human emotion and how it made you feel, and the purpose it gave you, it was just fantastic. And I probably say it's one of the best years of my life so far.
Right. Before the strike started, you were a militant in the National Union of Mineworkers. What was it like being a militant in the pit before the strike? I mean, did you learn about the union politics in the pit?
I think describing me as a militant before strike, I was a trade unionist. Trade union history, well, everywhere. When I started work down the pits in the 70s, I think I started around about 75 or something, and it was just after miners had defeated a Tory government in 1974. I remember power cuts and everything. This is before I started, but that victory that miners had and the rise of Arthur Scargill, who were then Yorkshire president, were everywhere. Men loved him. When I started as a 17-year-old lad in pits, they put you with you did your training, and then they put you with a couple of old blokes while you got to know the job and everything. And I got put with a couple of old blokes, Jack and Wilf. And these were like, I was about 17-year-old. These were like, I don't know how old they were, but to me they were like old men. And they just taught, not sat me down, but stories they used to tell about unions and about fightbacks and about Scargill. They loved Scargill. And so that's where my working class education sort of started to form. I remember Jack used to take me to union meetings. I asked him about union meetings. I'm going. He said, "Come with me." And I used to go to union meetings, and we'd go to union meetings. And I think first time I spoke in union meetings, I was with Jack, and I wanted to say something, and I told Jack what I wanted to say and asked him to ask it, and he just says, "No, I'm not asking you questions, you ask them." And that was like my first, I've got to stand up in front of all these blokes and ask a question, and I was crapping myself, you know what I mean? But that's our, that was becoming a trade unionist. That were about becoming, you know, becoming involved in union, becoming really these baby steps into getting inside the movement properly, really.
When I want to go to start at strike, and obviously the closure of Corton Wood was what started the strike. Very quickly that led to a national strike. Why was that? Why did Corton Wood spark so much energy and emotion across the coalfields?
You got to understand that what you just said there, that what started strike, it weren't start at dispute. We knew that Thatcher were coming for us. We knew as men, we knew for years, they threatened that they were going to come for us. That I mean, I know it sounds a bit trivial, or they wanted payback for 1974, but they did. Because NUM brought down a Tory government and won a massive pay rise and galvanised trade union movement in Britain and beyond. You know, it was significant. And one of Tory's aims was to weaken and smash trade union movement, and NUM were the leading protagonists in that, and they could extract a bit of revenge for what we did to them in 1974. So with that, so we knew all along. We used to have Scargill at the time. I think he was still Yorkshire president. We had a newspaper called The Miner, which we used to get every month. I think it used to come out. But we had a running commentary on what were happening. And Tories had got this plan called the Ridley Plan. I think Ridley Plan were in 1979. As miners, as trade unionists, we already knew what the Ridley Plan was. We knew what were coming down tracks to us, and so for us, it weren't Corton Wood weren't the start. It was the beginning of the strike, but we knew that were coming. And just immediately prior to the closure of Corton Wood, you've got to remember that most of Yorkshire coalfield, which was biggest coalfield, 56,000 miners plus, I think at the time in '84. Most Yorkshire there were individual disputes with walkouts, strikes. There were overtime bans on it, Barnsley area. You know, it was brewing. There were prodding us and they were poking us, and they knew what, you know, this was a run up. So at Pitted, they'd stopped for over 2 years. They were stockpiling coal. We used to come out at pit and walk past these mountains of coal, and we used to say to each other, "We're idiots. This is what they're preparing." And this were at every pit in country. The big stockpiles of coal, they were paying us bonus hand over fist to produce coal that were just getting stockpiled. So we knew what were happening. And then when Corton Wood and another pit called Bull Cliff Wood, both of them, the coal board decided to, well, the government, the coal board, whatever, they decided to close these without any negotiations. Corton Wood were having men from closed pits transferred there at the time. It was complete, provocation. And let's not talk about the fact that they brought in a union buster, Ian McGregor, from America, that were, again, it was just nothing but a known union buster. They put him in charge of coal board just prior to all this. So it were like as nightfall as day that the strike were going to happen. You know what I mean? That's exactly what was being planned by the government, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, when the strike starts, I mean, a lot of these films about the miners' strike now are concentrated on picketing in Nottinghamshire, and the Nottingham miners said they wanted a ballot. It was supposed to be, so Yorkshire miners were portrayed as like violent, undemocratic. And that narrative was what dominated the media at the time, was used against miners all the time, as if you were the lawbreakers and you were an enemy within, to coin a phrase. How do you respond to the charges that you were violent and undemocratic towards Notts miners?
Yeah, well, just going back to that last answer, we knew it was coming. Well, we knew it was coming on not just on an individual thing, but on a Yorkshire area thing. We all knew that were coming down tracks to us, and we had meetings. And there's, I believe, and National Union of Mineworkers were one of the most democratic unions that's ever lived and breathed in this country, and everything were votes, everything were back, and we knew this was coming, and basically we had a secret ballot in, I can't remember the exact year now, but it was about 2 or 3, 4 years before miners' strike. I think after they had a go at Wales, we had a vote, a secret ballot, to vote that asked the question, if the government shuts any pits provocatively without going through the due processes, what were all set in stone at that time, that we were giving the area leaders permission to call strike action. So we'd already had the vote, and that vote were parked until this happened. So we knew it was coming. We'd had our ballot, the secret ballot, which they were all this is what they were ranting and raving about. But it comes down to this. And it's principle of trade unions, that when the coal board closed Cottonwood Pit down, they closed them down, and it was closed down for 6 or 7 weeks before any other solidarity action were taken. And they put a motion to arrest the trade union movement in Yorkshire, biggest area in the country, most miners. So they put it in Yorkshire because of the stages they had to go through, and wanting support. And in our rules, you could ask other branches, if you went through the procedures, to support you, and every pit voted to support them. And then on top of that, if you had pickets turning up at your pit, you had a choice: do you cross a picket line or not? Well, it was also set in stone. We learned from a very early age that you don't cross picket lines. You should never cross picket lines, ever. And today that needs to be the case. Anybody listening to this who's saying, listen, get back to them principles about not crossing picket lines, because that were another thing. So we don't cross picket lines. We'd already agreed. And then when they called a meeting at our pit, I can only go from, and I know this will repeated at every pit across country. I went to a packed union meeting. When I say a packed union meeting, there were probably about 1,500 men at that meeting, every man in pit. And I remember our president getting up on stage and putting a resolution. There were all arguments for and against, blah, blah, blah. And then he put it to a voted union meeting. Are we going to support Cottonwood in their battle to try and save their pit? Because they were fighting to save their pit. We were just being asked whether we were going to support them. And I'll tell you now, I guarantee this, every single hand shot up instantly. I didn't see one vote, there were no votes against, but I didn't see no abstentions. 1,600 men voting after hearing arguments, voted to go on strike to support them. So I don't know how much more democratic you can be. I really don't know how you can get much more democratic than all these processes in the face of absolute provocation from coal board and government. So we in our hearts, we knew that we'd done the right thing, we followed the right protocols, and it sat well with us. Now the media wanted to, which everybody knows, just pick any paper up you like about any subject you like. They had an agenda, and they wanted to try and stir up an hornet's nest about picketing, about ballots. Even if you had a ballot, it was still what we're going to do, just like vote to close somebody else's pit. Well, you know, you couldn't do that. You know, you can't have a vote to say, you know, my pit's staying on, but I'm voting to close your pit, which ultimately that's what you're doing with that vote. So yeah, we lived with that, and it sat well with us. And as much as they tried to get it to, you know, outside our industry, it might have carried a bit of currency, but inside the industry, pickets, unions, we all knew scored, and it sat happily with us. Okay, I think.
From the Knox thing, I mean, obviously, police forces, your local police forces, your county police forces were mobilised against the pickets, and then they started to draft in coppers from the Met, Berkshire, etc., Birmingham, into the coalfields, and it became like more militarised, leading up to Orgreave. Now, you were at Orgreave, and you picketed Orgreave regularly. Do you want to just tell us, why was Orgreave being picketed? Why was it so important? And why, at the end of the day, did Orgreave fail to, you know, why were the police able to defeat the miners at Orgreave?
I would just want to go back onto first part about picketing in Nottingham. I understand that we went to Nottingham picketing. You've got to remember this was against the advice of the union officials. We burst the dam. Armthorpe basically walked across the fields from Armthorpe Pit to Haworth Colliery, because you could see it. The pits were, although they were in different areas, they were in touching distance, and it was the groundswell of the rank and file miners that wanted to go to talk to miners in Nottingham who were cajoled and encouraged to go to work, and against even Yorkshire NUM, Militant Yorkshire NUM did the best to stop us going picketing, but the dam, they come to hold back the dam. You know, we were going to go picketing, and that were it. So then they had to sanction it, or they had to either sanction it, or we were going to walk over them as well. My first night's picketing, I went to what do you call that pit?
Hollerton.
Weren't Hollerton. It'll come to me in a minute. But we went to that pit, and we went down, and we were night shift, and this is what happened. There were about 700-800 of us. Police were there. Police came up to us. He says, "We don't want any trouble, lads." He says, "Look, as they're coming in, you can stop them and talk to them in the cars. When buses come in, you can stop and talk to them on the buses." He says, "Half a dozen on you, no more." He says, "Rest of you've got to stay behind that cordon." And we went, "Okay, then all right, we'll do that." And that's how it was. So night shift starts rolling up, cars, blokes on bikes, buses, and we're coming up, and hour one at 6, and I don't know how I had become one at 6, just because I'm gobby, I think. And we went talking to them, and we started. Police were there allowing us to wave down cars. He told us, coppers, he says, if they don't want to stop, they don't stop. He says, they're going in. He says, but you're allowed to put your hand out and wave them down if you want, but if they want to keep going, I'm going to make sure they can get in. Oh, fair enough. And so anyway, cars started coming up, blokes on bikes, pedestrians, all coming for work for night shift. And guess what happened? We went and we talked to them. We got on a bus. I remember getting on a bus full of miners coming to work, and of course they were all going about Scargill, blah blah blah. And I said to them, "Look," I says, "I work in Eddings." I says, "Anybody here work in Eddings?" "Oh, we work at Eddings." I says, "Look, they're trying to sack us. They're trying to do this to us, trying to do that to us." And what happened is, just about to a man, everybody turned round and went home. Everybody turned round and went home. There were no violence, no nothing. They just listened to our arguments, rank and file Nottingham miners, turned round and went home. And I'll tell you what, we were like, this is easy. that's what we thought, this is easy. So there were no to do then until day shift come. We went for a walk around town and that, and come back for day shift. When we come back, we just thought it were going to be saying carry on. So we gets back, next thing, no 6 men, you're not allowed to stop anybody, nobody thing. And instead of coppers been there and thing, just stand behind this like riot police. And basically they'd realised that by us talking to them, that they were going to listen to arguments and they were going to vote with their feet and go home. They realised that, so they made a decision, let's not let them talk to them, and that's when trouble started on day shift, not night shift, day shift, because what happened is then riot police pushed us back, they wouldn't let us have anybody in road to talk to them, and then they were just running them in on convoys, waving them in. So you had buses, instead of stopping and talking to us, you just had them zooming past us. And we blamed police for that, and police were pushing us, and that were on the very first night, that first night of picketing for me anyway. And you know, all hell broke loose. You know, we got pushing and shoving, then people fell down, people getting up. That's when fights started with police. That's when, you know, local gangs started gathering. All that, that's where it started. And it started from simple fact that they won't allow us to carry out our trade union work and talking to our fellow workers. And that's really what that encapsulated what were happening at every single pit in Nottingham. We weren't allowed to go and talk to them, and then we were getting stopped at roadblocks. You know, it was like a bloody police state. You know, people were getting stopped in Kent from coming and picketing. They were stopping them in Kent, Dartford crossing. You know, because look, you know, this is supposed to be a free country, but you know, there's no laws for this. They were making it up as they went on, and they got media behind them, politicians behind them, and this is what we started to realise what we were up against, and so that was Nottingham encapsulated. We kept going down, we kept doing the best we can, but truthfully we weren't getting very far. You know, because die were cast, the modus operandi within thing, they'll come, we'll stop you with riot police, and they'll just go in, and then all sorts of conflicts will start taking place. You know, kettling, you heard about kettling, we were first group of people the police ever kettled, and they used to kettle us. I can remember being kettled at Gedling for the first time. After picket, well, went to go to us cars, after they won't let us go. They were like, they've gone, we're going home, I know, and they won't let us go. They're called kettling, and they kept us there for hours. And then what they did in front of us, where we got all us cars parked on road, legally parked, they've got tow trucks dragging us cars away in front of us. Well, we stood there watching them come up, throw a chain round your car and drag it away. This is what they were doing, and we couldn't get out. If you got out, you got arrested, and that was what we call kettling. Now they use that on every demonstration. Kettling, it's something they found effective. They'll do it. They won't even let you go to the toilet. They won't even let you go to the toilet if you need to go to the toilet. They'll have you there for hours. And we weren't the first group. It was like we were like lab rats for them. What can they do to us? What can they get away with? And they kept realising they could devote to us, and they kept getting away with it because media and everybody were backing them up. And that's what we're up against. But you know, we were up for it.
Moving on to Orgreave, really, because that was, a lot of people see that as like the turning point in the strike. You were at Orgreave. Just in a nutshell, tell us what it meant to you, that
nutshell.
It could be quite a large nutshell. But tell us what you make of that police operation. Look, and what effect it had on strike.
Look, you've got to understand what was behind Orgreave. This is what behind Orgreave was. NUM were built into different areas. Your three main areas, there were other areas, Lancashire, Derbyshire, blah blah blah, but your three main powerhouses in terms of NUM were Yorkshire, 56,000 miners, all NUM members. Leader was Jack Taylor in miners' strike. In Scotland you had Mick McGarkey, one of the most firebrand left-wing leaders you'd ever come across. Brilliant. It was scary. He was in Scotland. He was godfather of Scotland. And then you got Emlyn Williams in Wales. These were three main areas: Wales, Yorkshire, and Scotland. Don't get me wrong. There were Durham, there were all them, but these were three main areas. And what made them important was they all had big, massive steel plants. You got Langwern in Wales. You've got Scunthorpe in Yorkshire, and then you've got Ravenscraig in Scotland. And the thing is, they needed coal at these plants, and a lot of pits in these areas depended on supplying coal to these plants in normal times. And thing is, and so what government started putting out with, one of these plants were going to close. So what you end up, one of them, they didn't know, they won't tell you which one they were going to close. But so what happens is, you've got each union baron, you've got Emlyn Williams in Wales, Jack Taylor in Yorkshire, Mick McGarkey in Scotland. They were all saying behind closed doors, it's not going to be ours that's closed. And so straight away they started giving concessions to government to say, well look, we're on strike, but we'll let you move coal to these countries. They didn't want their steelworks closed after strike. And that was it. Then there were reporting Financial Times, because like I said earlier, we started reading these things, reading coal miners left school at 15, sat there reading Financial Times all of a sudden, you know what I mean? But I'm listening to Radio 4, and then we found out that through Financial Times that they'd been a report that said if miners actually stop coal production, stop steel production, which relies on coal, UK card industry will grind to halt in 6 weeks. We were like, wow, that sounds doable. We're not getting anywhere in Nottingham. Maybe we should have a look at steel. Scargill were already on it. Scargill, who was our national leader at NUM. But NUM's like a federation. You had national union, but they didn't have to no area had to march into step with national union, because they had all these different trade union barons, and they ruled their own rules. So although Scargill, on paper you might think, here's the most popular leader at NUM ever, who's leading us brilliantly, and he's saying we need to stop steel because car production is going to come to an halt. And the union barons, because of the sweetheart deals they've done over dispensations, they didn't want it. They didn't want us to picket Scunthorpe. Jack Taylor was terrified, and so again it was pressure from below that followed Scargill's call. The trade union bureaucracy, the branches, didn't want to do with Orgreave, but it was the rank and file miners, the picketers, who did. We were on Scargill's page in this when it comes to that. So Scargill started calling for mass picketing, and then we got told at our union meetings that we'd lose legal representation, to stop us money, petrol money for car. We used to get £1 for picketing, by the way, which were alright, we're better than no, you know what I mean, £1, and they pay you petrol, and they were going to stop that. They were going to let all sorts. If we went, they're threatening us if we went to Scunthorpe. So the only way we could get around it was on a morning, instead of us all going up to Orgreave, we had to go picketing first to Nottingham, get sent back, get turned around. Then what we would, a lot of blokes would go back home and go back to bed, but some of us would go straight up to Orgreave. Yeah, so we basically, again, it was rank and file led. Again, it was the dam that were bursting. So the trade union leaders in Yorkshire, Jack Taylor and them, they actually, relented and started allowing us to go to Yorkshire, but it were all tokenistic. What I mean by tokenistic, if everyone see footage on you see this news footage at Orgreave and that, just have a closer look at it, and you'll see that we were outnumbered every day by coppers. It was pathetic from our side. We were in Yorkshire, there were 56,000 miners out on strike, indefinite strike, over pit closures, and we never mustered more than 6,000 or 7,000 on that. 10,000 maximum on one day. It was pathetic, you know. It weren't mobilised, it was a tokenistic gesture on behalf of local trade union officials, area officials, and really that's why Orgreave became such a disaster for us.
I think the documentaries that we've seen on the television sort of imply that Orgreave was basically not quite the end of the strike, but it was from there on it ran down. People started going back to work and all that. But as I recall, in October '84, Margaret Thatcher was in tears in private and saying she didn't want to go on, that the miners had every chance of winning. Do you think the miners could have won, or at least they could have avoided defeat?
We always knew from the get-go, once Nottingham continued to work, 30,000 men producing coal, and on top of that, it made it very difficult then to organise, because of course you said, well, get your own, asking for solidarity, get your own men out first. So it made it, politically, it made it very difficult on the ground sometimes. But Orgreave flattened us. I'll tell you now, the morale, that's probably when the morale hit rock bottom after Orgreave. It really did bring everything down, and it was, you was shaking your head as a militant, as a picket, as an activist, as a supporter, as somebody that were collecting and giving food, etc. Yeah, it were probably, apart from end of strike, it were probably lowest moment in strike. Because what we knew all along is, did we think we could win? Did we think we'd get? Yeah, we always thought we could win, but we never thought we were going to win on our own. We never thought for 1 minute that all miners that were out were going to be able to defeat this government. But what we needed a second front. They got supporters. They've got every newspaper in Fleet Street supporting them. They've got every government supporting them. They've got every boss and every company supporting them. They got plenty of support, and we needed support. And for us to achieve any success in that thing, what we called at the time, we're opening up a second front. Orgreave were a great opportunity for opening up a second front, because if we could have stopped steel production, the second front would have become the halt to the car industry. That would have opened up a second front to government, and so that fell flat after that fell flat after defeat at Orgreave. But that's what kept us going. We needed a second front opening somewhere. And we needed a bit of luck somewhere, and that's what we were looking for after Orgreave. And what it pie in the sky, it weren't actually pie in the sky, because there were a number of potential instances. When you talk about Thatcher crying in November, there were a number of potential second fronts opening up, which went out to do with us. There were just pressures on, and one of them I remember well, were NACODs. NACODs, although...
Who were NACODs?
NACODs were like your supervisors. They were like your middle managements. They were like your safety people. They tested for gas and everything, and they were roped into production. It was a different union. It was like a management union they were in, as opposed to NUM. But they didn't cross picket lines, and they were getting paid. All these pits were on strike, and they were getting paid. And then, because the Hoobrers were up in the government and the coal board after Orgreave, they thought, well, why are we paying them to stay at home? So then they decided to start kicking them and saying, you know, if you're not going to cross picket lines, if you're not going to, we're not going to pay you. And so, of course, that kicked up a big stink, and they ended up balloting for strike action then. Now, you've got to remember this about NACODs. If NACODs goes on strike, no pit in the country can work, because they're in charge of safety. They test for gas, they do deal with all explosives.
So that shut down Nottinghamshire?
Yeah, well, it's just shut down everywhere. You can't run a pit. We are deputies. They're the laird of people that provide safety inside pits, and legally you can't even run a pit without them. And so they balloted, and they voted to go out on strike. This was the second front, and they've got two leaders whose name I can see the faces, but I can't remember the names now. And they sounded great, to be fair. You know, they come on news and they were saying all right things, and we were like, oh, this is going to happen. You know what I mean? This is going to happen. They've already voted to go on strike, and government were in a quandary, and even deputies, you know, because they're all like local lads and that, you know what I mean, you knew them, and a lot of them would be contributed half the wages to NUM, you know what I mean, they supported us and that, and everybody got excited about it, and even their trade union leaders mandated we a strike ballot. Walks into a meeting and we're like, thank goodness this has come round. And then half an hour later they walks out saying they've called in their action off. We're like, what? Everybody were like, what? How? And we don't know what went off behind them closed doors, but that was the second front gone. So potentially that could have been the second front that led us to victory. Then you got the dock workers strike. The dock workers highly unionised when we had dockers, highly unionised, very well organised, militant, most of them, you know, and I can't even remember what issue it was. It was totally unprotected. They refused to handle coal that were coming in from Poland and Australia and stuff like that. And but they balloted for strike action. And imagine a national dock strike, and that's what we were talking about. A national dock strike, and again, they had it headed off. It were headed off. The government made some concessions, and union leaders bought it. But so that were another second front that were there. And then we're not even going to talk about TUC in Scargill, a standing ovation, and every trade union been represented in there, all ready to go out and deliver solidarity and support us, and then I think it was Len Murray at the time, but might have been after Len Murray. But anyway, the long who is it? Wasn't it then? Willis. I would have said the fat and listen to me talking. And but yeah, they basically just undermined us. And so again, another second front. So, did we believe that we were on an hiding to nothing? No, we didn't, because we never believed we were going to do it on our own. But as the longer the strike went on, the more opportunities for a second front opening will become impossible, as all them that I've just explained all came trotted out one after another, and the longer you could keep it going, the more likely that you're going to have a second front opening up. If a second front had have opened up, we would have defeated the government on this.
But I mean, the decisive thing was there. the role played by Neil Kinnock as leader of the Labour Party and Willis as the leader of the TUC, and basically they prevented the solidarity there. But the solidarity, I want to move on before we finish to the solidarity that you did get, because the miners' strike did enter I first met you in a little market town in East Yorkshire where you came to talk about the strike to some women in a processing factory. Do you remember?
We're at Portland.
Yeah, at Portland. And it went all over the country. There was miners' support groups in little towns and villages, people delivering. We used to collect food, anything we could, fuel. We used to take it to Selby, dump it off. And there was a network of solidarity for the miners all over the country on the one. So the solidarity was there. But before we move on to that, really, or as part of that solidarity, I want you to just say a bit about the miners' wives. It'd be nice if we could have had a miner's wife here today. But, the miners' wives, in a way, 6 months into strike, they provided the absolute backdrop for what was needed in the strike. It needed to move not just to picketing, but to cans of food, tins of beans, loaves of bread. That was what was going to maintain the strike, was food kitchens, and then the gift from the trade union movement. And I'm just a bit near you, near Frickley was Broadsworth, and I remember there was a print union lorry from London came up at Christmas time, full of Christmas presents for kids, to give kids at Christmas, and it's like, tear-jerking memories. There was some superb solidarity, and I just wondered if you could sort of frame that solidarity, what you remember of it, what do you remember speaking at any meetings, and what you think about the miners' wives and their contribution to the strike.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was the way that the media and the government were trying to portray miners. They were trying to portray us as violent, hostile, Scargill-loving people that had to be defeated. And in working class history, it's needs must. It's not about big ideas, it's not about big theories and things like that. It's about the here and now and what the working class people do to deal with it. Well, we had an here and now problem. We didn't have any money and we were running out of food and clothes. And so what happened is that people who you'd never thought of, they themselves would have never thought of it, became active. And the women entered the arena of this in massive industrial action, and they entered it where they couldn't be really slated for anything, because all they were doing is cooking us food and eating, and it were ordinary mums and wives and sisters and mothers and aunties. It were everybody, and they were coming together, and they got a massive political education when they entered it. And that's when I said about going back to the first question about why it was such a great year, because you actually saw people changing in front of your very eyes, becoming political, starting to talk about political events, tackling problems like racism. These pit villages weren't havens for socialist views. There were plenty of racists about. There were plenty of blokes going on picket lines and shouting, "Get your tits out" for the lads, and all that sort of stuff. And then the women entered the stage, and it changed the tone. It changed the tone of everything. It changed our tone as men, because we started to respect these women, that these women were now organising themselves, were now integral to our fight, and they were a part of it. They used to turn up on picket lines, but speaking selfishly, better than that. They were cooking us breakfast, and we'd get back, and we were lucky at Frickley. We had breakfast and dinner. We had 2 meals a day, and so they were brilliant, and you got ordinary housewives who never done out but use fairly washing up liquid and take the kids to school in miners' welfare, speaking to 400-500 miners. You know what I mean? It was momentous for ordinary working people, and it changed the narrative. It changed how people thought, and this was happening in real life. You know, you opened your front door and this was happening other side of your front door, and it was absolutely brilliant.
When strike came to an end, you know, I mean, it was a very emotional time. I remember marches back to pits, bands playing, union banners flying, and it was a depressing time. And I just wondered, to finish off our interview, Jim, whether you could just tell us about what it was like going back to work after the strike, and how you got people's spirits back up, stopped them sinking into apathy, continued to fight. You know, the government policy was still to shut pits.
There's no doubt about it. It was absolutely devastating end of strike. I'm not sure where else it could have gone. And it was depressing. It was highly depressing, and it was very emotional. There were people just refused to go back to work, just refused, walked away from industry. They couldn't face going back, and but we did go back, and you know, we tried to hold his head up and be proud, and we had plenty to be proud of. What we'd been through and what we'd done and what we stood for, and a lot of us still didn't want to go back when we did, but we did go back, and it was, as you imagine, it were, listen, you can't dress this up in any other way. We were defeated, heavily defeated. They took us, they done us. You know, union were absolutely far weaker after this than they'd ever been. In many ways, it was just a union in name, not much else. Because you know, it had taken everything out of us. It had taken, you know, the best trade unionists, the best militants. You know, it had emptied us in terms of what we were doing, where we could go. And I tell you, when we got back, they didn't have to stick the boot in. The management, they absolutely stuck the boot in. What happened is, loads of people went on sick. You know, they couldn't face going to work. There were depression. It was just horrible from the eyes of the strike. Don't get me wrong, as I've said, there's highs and lows, but you know, in all, you were in control. You know, you were doing what you had to do, and that, and it left you with a good feeling. You could go to bed and put your head on pillow and go to sleep without any worries. But when you got back to work, it were absolutely soul destroying, and they just stuck the boot in hard and fast. And another thing which were incidental, is that when we were on strike in big solid areas, where everybody were out on strike. I'm not saying it was true for everybody, but yeah, we didn't pay any rent, we didn't pay his mortgages, we didn't pay any electricity. They were all like, they want, oh, you're on strike, yeah, no, you don't have to pay. Oh, we owed them money, but we didn't have to pay there and then. So for 12 months, you know, one of the ways we survived, that we didn't have to pay any rent. I was in a pit house, and we didn't have to pay any rent. They used to stop it off as wages while I weren't working, so there were not to stop it off it. But so all this council tax, Labour, don't worry about your council tax, you know, you're on strike and everything. They understood, and they cut us a bit of slack. You know, electricity companies, gas companies, they cut us some slack during strike. Once strike were over, they wanted the money, and they wanted it yesterday. And and then we were back at work. We couldn't earn any bonus because, you know, there's all this talk about the desperate for coal. They wanted us to go back to work. The mothball industry, they had us doing anything but produce coal. So you couldn't earn any bonus. You were on flat money. It was absolutely soul destroying when we got back to work. It was really bad, and it went on and on for things. But one of the things that I think made a difference, it certainly made a difference at Frickley, is because there were a group of us at Frickley during miners' strike, became very political. I became a revolutionary socialist during miners' strike. I joined Socialist Workers' Party, I became active in Socialist Workers' Party. And one of the things you've got to understand about being in an organisation like that, whatever your views are on it, it meant that at least once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, you had an organisation around you that could keep you, could keep you honest, that could back you up, that could listen to you, that could support you, that give you politics, that give you the politics. I remember that there were an industrial organiser called Sheila McGregor, and she once says to me, Paul, she says, you've been fighting bosses for a year. She's, are you going to continue fighting them? I says, of course I am, Sheila. I don't want to walk away. She says, well, and she picked a book up. She says, unless you start reading books, you won't be fighting them. She says, so you better start reading them. And so an whole layer of us became politicised, we got into politics, and it was a lifeblood for us, and it meant that we didn't go down. A lot of militants involved, better men than I am, went under because they didn't have the politics. You know what I mean? Same were happening to us as were happening to them, but we had a bit of political theory to hang on to. We had a history to draw upon, and that's what kept us going on. And what we did, slowly but surely, we fought little battles. We fought little battles on a day-to-day basis, and we got very good at it. And so, of course, they were trying to attack us pay and conditions when we got back. They were trying to change bonus. Most of our wages were made up of bonus payments. So when they started messing about with bonus payments, it affected us massively in terms of us money in his pocket. And they started to divide and rule. Oh, you're doing hard work, we should pay you more bonus, at the expense of people on buttons, people on haulage, electricians, blah blah blah. Auxiliary workers are not necessarily at the at the coal face. And we had to fight that on a day-to-day basis. It was a nightmare, but we kept doing it, we kept building. And then what happened, little walkouts started, little seeds, if you like, little seeds of fightbacks came. We weren't talking about another mass miners' strike, but we were talking about, you sent a bloke out at pit for no reason, we're all going out. You put a finger on him and we're all marching. And that happened a lot. Where if they sacked somebody, because they'd sack people, for looking at a manager the wrong way, they'd sack people, and we'd stuck together at our pit, not only our pit, but I think we were one at best, because we had probably about a dozen activists who were in SWP, who were reading, who were revolutionary socialists, and we were able to we weren't a lot of us, but there were enough of us to be able to instigate these battles on these little victories. And that's how we started to build morale and build momentum back into pits, and it really did show benefits. Our pit, for instance, a manager once pointed out to us that we produced the less amount of coal in country, but we were paid the most bonus, and we had to fight for that hammer and tongue. All other pits around us accepted these changes to the bonus scheme, and we refused to. We refused to. Don't get me wrong, it weren't easy. You were having some shouting matches at union meetings, and you weren't liked. I weren't the most popularist bloke who worked in pit. You know what I mean? I were hated by some of men. No, I'll say that again. I were hated by most of men. and this. But what we did.
But you're respected by a lot of men, Jim.
Yeah, listen, when it come to crunch, they ended up sticking their hands up in right way, you know what I mean? But listen, nobody, the thing is, you see what happened, you'd have a dispute, all men would walk out, and they were all happy walking out. Everybody were happy walking out of a pit. But then next week they were short in the wage packets, and then it was like my fault, not me particularly, but you know, us for having dispute. You know, so you know, there were difficult times, but this is where having the party, having the SWP around me, and me being around SWP, it was the only way that it could happen, because you know, although you felt like weak and giving up, you know, you got an organisation that were broader and better, and you could lean on it when you had to, and then slowly we started to, you know, our mood and the momentum picked up. You know what I mean? Because you know, they made it easy for us because they were always kicking us and poking us, bosses I mean. They were all, you know, management, petty. You know what I mean? They were always having a go, and it made it easy for us to resist them. You know what I mean? Because they were hated. You know what I mean? So we were pushing it to open doors in many ways. But it took that, you know, compared to militants who were on picket line every day, and us that became revolutionary socialists. We all went through the same thing, but we all had a different story. We all had a different journey. And if I think, you know, I'd have been part of them men voting through changes to the bonus scheme if I hadn't been if I had to become a political animal. So that's really what saved us, and Frickley became a beacon for everybody again. Up until it shut in '93, we became a beacon just in Coalfield. We became a beacon what could be built, and I'm really proud of what we all did there. I'm really proud of it.